First thing we need to do is we need to go and get a very handy script, Python script, that will allow us to transfer data between After Effects and Modo. To do that, we're going to go and find a particular thread on the forum. So I'm at the Foundry community. Here's the forums, and I'm just going to search from the top level here. So I'm just going to click search over here, and we're looking for this. The keywords we're looking for is After Effects Bridge in 801. Okay, so I'm just going to enter that and just do submit. And then I'm going to let the search do its thing. And here we are. After Effects Bridge in 801, any interest. That's the name of the thread. It's top of the list. So let's click on that. Now, I've read this thread and I happen to know that the point of interest is page 6. So I'm going to come over here, go to page 6, and then just need to scroll down to find the start. Now, you can read this thread. It's quite interesting if you want to spend time reading it. But down here we have this embedded picture, and the Modo user is a bat, and it says here, for the data exchange between Foundry Modo and After Effects, I use own script AE panel. And what he's basically done is he's taken aspects or code of After Effects IO by Frederick Stenson. Now, this is the one I used to use. It does no longer work in 801 because of the change to the Python. So to do the fix for that, he's also taken AE export by John Knoll, and then he's basically added his own code to generate this panel here that will appear inside of Modo. So we can download it here, but we don't want to download this one because it's been updated since this was posted, bug fixes, stuff like that. There's a few little instructions here though that are worth reading on how to use it, but I will briefly cover that in the video. So what we need to do is find the latest version. So let's scroll down and go to the very last page of the thread. And what we're looking for is the latest version posted by a bat. And here it is here. You can see he's done a 3.3 beta. But now here is a 0.05 beta. And there aren't any other versions currently posted, so this is the latest one as of the 18th of July 2014. You'll notice some nice new features added. The really nice one is cut and paste data from System Clipboard. That's a feature that if you're used to working between Mocha AE and After Effects, you'll be familiar with. This is now supported between Modo and After Effects. Very nice indeed. And as you can see, it's been tested under Windows 7 and Modo 801 Service Pack 1. I'm running Modo 801 Service Pack 1 on Windows 8.1, works fine. So let's get it. Let's click on the link here. This will open up a panel to save. Depending on the browser you're using, you should choose whichever. And I'm just going to go to my downloads directory. I keep a Foundry folder and scripts, and as you can see I've already downloaded it here, so just find a place in your system and download it to that folder, and then once you've got it downloaded, the next stage we'll have a look at is installing it into Modo. I've got Modo 801 Service Pack 1 running here. First thing we need to do is find the user scripts folder, and the easiest way to do that is from within Modo itself. So System menu and open user scripts folder. So select that. Here is our user scripts. I have my old script in here. This works still with 701, but it doesn't work with 801, so I have it disabled within 801. And I'm going to open a window that basically has the download area where I put the downloaded script. So under scripts, here is the zip file After Effects Panel 5 Beta. I'm just going to double click to go in here. And to install it, all we need to do is I'm just going to grab the whole folder and pull it out and drop it in the scripts folder over here. So that will put that in there. We now need to relaunch Modo, so I'm going to shut Modo down and I'm going to run Modo again. And now with Modo back up and running, we just need to make sure it's installed, and the place where it's installed to is under Setup. So I'm just going to go to the Setup tab And if we look down here, here is AE panel. There it is. So that script is installed successfully. So we're going to be able to use it now to do our data transfer between Modo and After Effects. Now that we have the AE panel installed, we need to set up our scene in Modo so we can start working with After Effects. So I'm going to go to the Render tab, and what I want to do is I want to import our image sequence that we're going to use for the tracking. So down over here, I'm simply going to go to Add Layer. Now I've already loaded a sequence before, so it's remembered here, but if you're not sure, you can go down to Image Map, and we want to load a sequence, not a still. So I'm just going to select that, and I'm going to go to the project After Effects IO, and under Movies I have created, now this is a 720p version, I've just made this for ease. It's going to be faster for playback. The original was 1080, I've just made 720. Now that's now loaded as a sequence, and what we want to do is we want to make sure it's down in the environment. So I'm just going to drag it down here and drop it in environments, and we'll see it goes in here. And we want to make sure that it's an image sequence, so I'm going to go to the image sequence tab. We can see now it's listed here as first frame and last frame, 0 and 149. And what I want to do is also make sure, as you can see up here, it's not really the right sort of aspect ratio, and that's because we haven't set our render to match the image sequence. If we check this image sequence, we know it's 720p, but we can check that by going here, and you can see under resolution it says 1280-720. So I'm going to select render, set this to 1280 by 720. So that's now matched the sequence. Now it's still not going to kind of work yet, and that's because we actually haven't got it inside our actual environment. We need to make sure that this map is under our main environment. I've only got the one. And then of course we need to set up the texture locator for this, because at the moment the reason this isn't mapping properly is it thinks it's probably a spherical mapping. So let's have a look. Texture locator with the image sequence selected, and automatically actually it's chosen cubic, so this isn't a lot of use to us. We want to map from the camera that we have in our scene. If we come over to item list, we have the wonderful camera in any new Modo scene here, and this is the camera that we want to project our image from. So I'm just going to go back to our environment sequence and come down to texture locator, select front projection and set it to camera. And this is our camera. Now we can see the image sequence is correctly formatted up here in the preview, and it's also now appeared in the camera view down here. So welcome, this is me you're looking at, so I'm using myself as a guinea pig for this one. Now that we've done that, I'm going to switch back to the setup tab, and I've got two views here. I've set this up for a two view system. You should know how to do that. If you've got a one view up here, just simply hold down the control key, click on this little yellow dot and drag it to the left, and you'll get a second viewport, and then you can set one to be the camera, and in this case I've got one to be perspective. So when we're transferring data between After Effects and Modo, it's handy to be able to see what the camera's seeing here, and also see your overall scene with all the locators and things in it here. We're just going to set a few things up now. We know that our image sequence, if we go back to the render tab briefly and have a look at our image sequence under here, we'll know that it starts at 0 and ends at 149. It's very important to get this synchronized between After Effects and Modo. If things start in Modo at 0 or your image sequence starts at 0, then make sure that your Modo sequence runs from 0 to the top frame number of your sequence. And also likewise in After Effects, when we get to that, we'll do the same. We'll make sure After Effects is set to start counting at 0. Let's take that information, go back to the setup panel. I'm just going to click on settings, and we want to set the start and end scene to 149. Start is 0, that's what we want. So we'll set both of these to 149. I'm in the UK, so all of this stuff was shot at 25p. If you're in a different format, make sure that you set your frame rate here correctly, and make sure that matches back through to After Effects. That's very, very important. Okay, so with that set, we can now drag the timeline around and we'll see that I'm updating in the viewport, so that's good. We've got an animated sequence updating in the viewport, which is just what we want. One last little thing we want to do is check the camera. We need to make sure when we go between After Effects and Modo the cameras match, so I'm just going to check what the camera is here. Modo's default is a 50mm, and it defaults to a film back of 36mm, which is a stills camera format, as you may know. So we need to keep that in mind when we work in After Effects. So now that we've checked everything, we can switch to After Effects and go to the next stage. We now need to set up After Effects so that our projects match. I'm not going to do anything fancy here, but the first thing I want to do is go to the File menu, to Project Settings, and just check a few things. Now, we're not using timecode, but my default base is 25 because I'm in the UK. I tend to work in frames, and for this project I'm working in frames. You'll notice down here it says frame count start at 1. Now we want to match Modo and the image sequence, and I know my image sequence starts at 0, counting, and ends at 149. If we left this at 1, then basically our timeline would be 1 to 100, and when we rendered out of After Effects, our frame number would start at 1 instead of 0, and that meant that if we imported anything to Modo to check, it could be out by 1 frame, and we'd have to resync it inside of Modo. So it's very important to make sure that your frame count synchronization works as well. So I'm setting After Effects to start at 0, just like Modo. This is not a fancy project, so it's going to be 8 bits per channel. I'm not going to bother about setting a color workspace for this project. So that's good. Just want to import some footage now, so I'm going to import my test footage that we're going to track. So I'm just going to navigate to the After Effects IO project that I set up. Movies, Allen 720p. This is a JPEG sequence, as I mentioned. I made this earlier by downscaling the original 1080p footage from my DSLR. So it's come in because I'm using the system, my system set up properly. It's come in and it's set to 25 frames a second as an image sequence. That's another feature you obviously would set up in After Effects to make sure that it comes in properly with no still images. I'm just going to drag this down onto the little film icon, and that will make a column for me with all the correct parameters. So if I look down here, it says 50%, it's 720p, so if I zoom in to 100%, you can see it's slightly bigger than the screen. This is because I'm working with a screencast and I have my After Effects window reduced in size. So here we are. I'm just going to do a fit just to make it easier to see. This is our sequence, and it's 149 frames long. I can simply just ram play it so you can have a quick look at the action, and I'll sort of briefly talk you through what we're going to do. So you can see the motion here, and I'm going to track this side of my glasses so that I can basically go into Modo and attach a particle system to the track that basically follows approximately the centre of my pupil around as I move through the shot. And as you can see, my head's moving and there's little head turns and things like that. All that's going to be taken into account when we track this in Mocha AE. So to set this shot up further, we need to do one or two things before we can do any tracking. First thing I want to do is I want to make sure I've got something to apply the tracking data to, and it's good practice, even though you can go into Mocha AE and do a lot of tracking, it's good practice to have something to apply the data to, like a layer or a shape or whatever. If I'm not sure what I want to apply the data to, I tend to use a null object, so I'm just going to go down here. So I'm just going to go and set up a new null object. So null object, and I'm going to name this. So with it highlighted, hit return. I'm going to call this I'm going to call it track underscore I. So this is going to take my tracking data from Mocha when it's ready. And as we can see, we've just got a red null object right in the center of the image. So what we need to do now is launch Mocha AE. To do that, we need to have some footage to do that with. So you need to highlight some footage. I've got the comp here, so I'm going to highlight my footage layer in the comp and come up to the animation menu. And down here you'll see we've got track in Mocha AE, so I'm just going to select that, and that will launch Mocha with this footage. Here is the Mocha new project panel. It's automatically loaded our footage, so you can see it knows which clip to import. Now, one of the things I tend to like to do is it's name the project the same as the comp name inside of After Effects. That's fine. What I'm going to do is just add the word track to the end of this. And the other thing I'm going to do is change the location. This location here automatically will put the Mocha project file in a subdirectory where the footage is. I tend to want to put it in with other scene files, so I'm just going to navigate to my projects folder, to After Effects IO. Down here I have a scenes folder that Modo creates. I'm going to put it in there, so it's along there with, I'm going to put the After Effects file there. I'm also going to put the Modo scene files in there, so they're all in one tidy place for this particular project. So the Mocha project is now going to be called this, and it's going to be put into this folder, and it's taking the JPEG footage from the same location that After Effects has got it on disk. You'll notice it's already realised it's got the correct frame range, 0 to 149. Just double check these, it's always good. 25 frames is what I need, but if this is not the same frame rate as your footage, make sure it's set properly. And the pixel aspect ratio is HD, so it's a down sample version of 1080p. So this is good, so I'm just going to OK. First thing I'm going to do before we work is I'm going to cache the footage. Mocha works really well with caching footage. Once it's in RAM, it'll play back in real time. Makes it a lot easier. I'm going to come down here. This, by default, Mocha bounces footage, so when it gets to the end of the timeline, footage will bounce back again. I prefer loop mode, so I'll just click on that once and put it in loop mode. I'm just going to hit the play head here, and this will cache the footage into memory so that we can just watch it and play back in real time. It'll be a lot quicker when we're working, so there we go. So this is now running real time, and we can start our track. So I'm just going to stop that, wind back to the beginning. Now, one of the things we need to do, since I know that I want to track the eye here, I want to find a frame where I think it's good to start the track from. I could start here, except my glasses are at a slight tilted angle, and when I put my planar surface here, I would like to try and get it as level as possible. So I'm just going to see if there's any other places in my footage that might be a good place to start where my glasses are fairly level. I would say maybe round about here. This is frame 145 of my sequence. Glasses are pretty level there, so I'm actually going to use this as my start frame, and I'm going to track both forwards and backwards from here. So first thing I want to do, create an X spline, my favourite spline. I'm just going to draw an X spline around these glasses. Now I can zoom in here if I want, so I'm just going to hold down the Z key on the keyboard. That'll let me zoom in if I need to see a bit more detail. I'm just going to adjust the spline, just give it a bit of extra area to work with. Just make sure it's got enough information to capture and get a good track. Generated our initial keyframe because I've set the spline here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to track forwards, since there's only a few frames to go forwards. So let's go here to track forwards, and that's tracked forwards now pretty well. Now one of the things I haven't done, and a slight mistake here, if I come back and drag the time center back to my green start frame, if we look down here at our tracking, we're going to track translation, scale, rotation and shear. Now I'm interested in the position information of my eye. In particular, I'm interested in the position information of my iris pupil, so I don't really need to be tracking shear. What I'm interested in is translation, rotation and scale, because when I transfer this data into After Effects, I'm only going to want to transfer the position, rotation, scale data. I'm not doing corner pinning on this project, so I don't really want shear to be switched on, so I'm going to turn that off so that we're only tracking these first three. I'm just going to retrack now to the end of the shot, so that's overwritten that tracking information. Now come back to the green keyframe. I'm going to track backwards to the beginning. Okay, so now we've had a track. Let's see how the track is done. Just going to move this down a bit. Let's turn on the planar surface. So this is the little blue rectangle. I'm going to go back up here. Just see how it's going to stick. Now, one of the first things I want to do is I'm going to adjust this planar surface. So if I just go, let's select the zoom tool. Let's just go in and I'm just going to adjust the planar surface. Just use the select tool. The zoom windows here can be a bit annoying. You can see them popping up. If they're getting in the way, just turn them off on the side when it turns them off. So turn the planar surface back on, and I'm just going to center this on the eye, the iris, because obviously what I'm interested in is tracking the pupil. Also, the planar surface controls the center of our translation rotated scale. So it's actually the center of this box that will be transferred into After Effects. So we're interested in centering that on the eye. So let's turn on our mesh and see how this sticks. I'm just going to wind back to the beginning, zoom out a bit. In fact, I'm going to do a fit. So view, zoom to fit. Let's just see how well it sticks. Well, it's sticking pretty well. You may notice it's not quite staying the same orientation. Let's just show and prove that. One of the easiest ways to do that is I'm just going to hide the grid and the planar surface. I'm going to come down here with our current layer selected. I'll just slide this out a bit so you can see the layer name. I'm going to come down here to insert clip. I'm going to select an 8x8 grid. Now the grid's quite small because it's sort of set to the size of the planar surface. Now that I've got the planar surface set to the size of the eyeball, I can actually make it bigger again if I want to. So if I turn it back on, so I'm just going to select the zoom tool and zoom in again. Come down a bit. Select tool. There. So now with the edge selected, the red edge, I can just stretch it out a bit in either direction. I just want to make sure I keep it centered on the eye. I can put this back afterwards. I'm just looking to see if this grid is staying. If I turn off overlays, we're just left with the grid now. So let's go back to view, zoom to fit. Let's play that. That's staying pretty well. There's a very, very slight tilt drift at the beginning. You'll notice that here the grid's quite level. So at the front of the shot here, it's tilting at a slight angle. I'm not going to worry about this. We can do a better track, and in fact, if I track the 1080p footage, this would be better. But keep in mind, what we're interested in is the center of this information. We're interested in what the pupil is doing, not really if the planar surface is perfectly aligned. And because we're going to be using a particle system in Modo to string some particles from this tracking point, it's less of an issue if the things aren't perfect. So they don't have to be perfect. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to turn the grid off. To none. Turn my planar surface back on, overlays on so I can see it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to size it one last time to make sure it's organised, sort of fitted around the eye nicely so I know where the centre point is. So that when we export it out of Mocha, we get the centre point of the eye, which is what we're after. So let's go to the select tool, and I'm just going to drag the sides around the iris. So, and the centre of this box is going to go out, and that is the centre of the iris, which is what I'm after. Okay, so let's just view fit. So with the planar surface set up, we can now just check everything, so that's good. So that's kind of doing what we want. So what I'm going to do now is be tidy. I'm going to come over here to the layout panel. I'm going to double click on our track, and I'm going to call this track I, because we haven't named the layout. It's always good to name things. We don't want to accidentally track again, so the other thing I'm going to do is just turn off the cog icon, so this will make sure that we don't accidentally retrack this now that we've tracked it. We'll also lock it for good measure. So now we're ready to export this tracking data out to After Effects. So I'm just going to do a quick check in After Effects before we export the data. The object of interest for us is going to be this track null we mentioned. I'm just going to make sure that's highlighted. This is what we're going to paste our data to in After Effects. So let's jump back to Mocha AE. I'm going to unlock the layer, make sure it's selected, come down here and select the Export Tracking Data button. Now the one we're after is already selected, but you may find that you've got it set to something like corner pin, supports motion blur. We don't want any of these two corner pin options. What we want is After Effects transform data, anchor point, position, scale and rotation. With that selected, we could save this to a text file if you're going to be sending this stuff to other people to work with. This is a good way to do it. But since we've got After Effects running, the very nice easy option is to go copy to clipboard. So that tracking data is now on the computer clipboard. So let's go back to After Effects. Okay, back in After Effects. Now before we paste the data, it's very important to check one thing. When you paste data, you need to make sure where the playhead is. If the playhead happens to be down here somewhere in the timeline, and you paste data onto an object, then all of the transform data will actually start at the point in the timeline where the playhead is and move on from there. And obviously that's not what we want, because we're working on the principle that everything's from frame 0. Mocha has worked on this frame range starting at frame 0. So if the playhead is not at frame 0, then you need to make absolutely certain that it's 0. You can do that either by going up here and clicking the Go to Start button, or you can use the Home button on your keyboard, which will achieve the same thing. So playhead at 0, we have track I null object, which is this object here selected. And what we're going to do now is we're going to paste the data from Mocha. So I'm going to go up here to the Edit menu and simply select Paste, and immediately you'll see all of the transform data has appeared for both the position, scale and rotation, and you can see the track starting at the central pupil is here. However, one thing you'll notice is the null object isn't where it's supposed to be. It's actually over here on the left hand side, and the reason for that is that Mocha automatically duplicates the track data on both the position and the anchor point. This is just a usability thing, and what we have to do to fix this is to delete it. So I'm just going to click here to deselect all these different layers so that we don't actually have any of the keyframes selected. I'm going to select the anchor point track, and I'm going to turn off the little stopwatch icon, and that's going to kill all the keyframes. But it's still going to leave the null object up here on the left. So to fix that, we just need to come down here to the X, type in 0, click on the Y value and type in 0, and now you'll see that the null object in the top left corner, which is where the null object is centered, is now back exactly on where the tracking data is. So with that done, we can play this back. Now obviously I'm not going to, if I RAM play this, I'm not going to see the null, because the RAM player by default hides features like nulls and temporary objects. So, but I can just drag through the timeline, and you can see now that the null object is now following the center of my pupil based on the Mocha tracking data. So that is basically now the data we need. We're ready to go, and what we need to do now that we know the track's good is we need to send this tracking information into Modo.